Torres. I'm a member of the steering committee, and I'm here to welcome you to our 6th Resist Hate meeting. I'm glad we still filled all the tables in the cafeteria, so that's really amazing. Okay, so we know it's been a while since we met last, but we're really happy to see everybody here, especially with the weather turning much brighter and giving us many more alternatives to political activity. So it's good that we can see everybody here. And we're glad to be continuing something on into the summer and trying to keep some of this momentum going. We know when the legislative season ends and the weather turns better and people start getting used to kind of some new social and political norms, it can be really hard to keep yourself engaged and active and concerned about what's going on. So the fact that we can get this many people together on a really nice sunny day is something that I think speaks really positively to the potential for continued change in Rhode Island. So we've got a great little set of sessions for you here today. The point of this meeting is to take stock of how we've done this year and kind of see how we can do a little bit better next year. There's certainly been successes, and there have also been some failures, and so looking back at those and figuring out how we change, how we act, and how we organize, and how we think about our problems is going to be a big part of keeping this momentum moving and kind of increasing our influence in the state. So our sessions are going to focus on how to build power in your community, how to lobby and support legislation where you can, and if there's no legislation coming out of the people who are supposed to be proposing it for you, maybe getting in there and stepping up and taking those positions for yourselves. So we're really oriented towards building a much bigger movement and keeping it progressive and lively and smart and engaged and intellectual. So I'm going to resort to a list here. So we're going to have a panel about the state legislative session. So some of the organizations fighting for different pieces of legislation will do some reflecting on their sessions so far and talk about what we can do to be even stronger as we go into the next year. We're going to have a session about running for office or supporting somebody else who you know who would be running for office. And that's going to be run by a couple of steering committee members we have here, Lofton and Georgia. Lofton's feeling a little sick, so you have to be real nice to him when you get him in there. We're going to have a session that'll cover how to start more local resist hate groups in your community. This will be run by the leaders of the Cranston Action Network and the East Bay Resist Hate Groups. And then we're also going to have a session on the Community Safety Act. So after 4 years, that ordinance finally passed through the Providence City Council. That was super cool to see and to watch the pressure that was able to be applied to the city councilors. And that was one of the coolest grassroots things that I've seen come out of our little city. And you know, it was my first real introduction to seeing that happening live in Providence. And so for me, getting to see a win on something that hits on so many different levels of how our community is organized and how we interact with our government was really super neat. Okay. And then we're going to take just a second to introduce the new steering committee members. So there's Raul, who I think I saw come in. He's a community organizer with Fuerza Laboral in Central Falls. So he fights for workers' rights and immigrant rights right on the front line. There's Walter Anthony, who's up here. He's a retired academic dean and professor. There's Bethany Foster from Bristol. She started the East Bay Resist Hate Group. There's Abby Godino, who I think I saw too. She's from Cranston. She has a background in strategic research in labor and electoral organizing. There's Georgia Hollister-Isman. She's a director of the Working Families Party in Rhode Island and brings a decade of experience organizing for progressive candidates and causes. There's Jane Lazar-Tucker, who helped to co-found Indivisible Rhode Island. There's Jane. There's Kate Vanderwide, a writer and a former journalist. There's Justin Boyan, who's not here today, but he's a computer scientist who helped co-found the Climate Action Group. There's Kyle Stump, who's here. He's a Providence resident and lifelong Rhode Islander who's passionate about passing progressive legislation here in the state. That was a lot of P's, that was difficult. There's Lofton Asensio, who's an electoral organizer. And then there's me. I do housing civil rights enforcement for the federal government. So, and one thing that you're going to note in that list, if you have committed all of our emails to photographic memory, there were not as many names on that list as there were in the past. We've lost a few people who have decided to focus their attention in other places. And you know, kind of one of the things that's difficult about organizing in the left in the United States is our version of the left is much is much smaller than the versions of left that you see like in Europe, and we have to occupy a much broader intellectual and political space, and so there are going to be a lot of differences. And I think part of getting ourselves to the well-developed liberal society that we see in so much of the rest of the civilized world is starting to push that liberal agenda just further and further along, so there are opportunities for that differentiation to really pop out and to allow us to still be organized around the things that we need to be organized around, while being able to differentiate in our policy and social goals in other ways. So we've, and the steering committee has met a few times over the last few weeks to talk about how to take Resist Hate from what it is right now and build it into the future. How to create connections among the people that we're serving, but then also all the organizations that we're trying to get people involved in. Because in order to make lasting and progressive change, this has to be a long-term movement. I think we've seen that this room is differently occupied than it was in December, I think, when we started. And we have to keep that going if we want to see something continue to come out of this. So this summer we plan to turn our focus to building power and keeping everybody activated and ready to resist hate in Rhode Island. We're going to make sure that when the next state legislative session starts, or an opportunity arises, that we're ready to take action. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Jane, and we're going to keep this moving for you.